Welcome back to the Brahma Bulletin, your number one source for all things San Antonio Brahmas. In today's video, I'm going to be going over the game that we played against the Orlando Guardians, a victory, our first victory in franchise history. So let's get into it. So the game was played at Camping World Stadium in Orlando, Florida on the 16th of February, and we won 30-12. So looking at some of the team stats, the thing that sticks out to me the most is our rushing. Our rushing yards was abysmal, especially compared to last week when Kalen Balaj had 84 yards all by himself. And this week we only mustered 66 yards total. Now, the one good thing that I did see here is that we held Orlando to only 175 yards of total offense. So pretty good. And also, we see that we had our very first interception of the year. So, passing, we saw that Jack Cohen was 16 to 24 for 165 yards with a 6.9 yards per average, three touchdowns, no interceptions. So, those three touchdowns were great. He did get sacked twice, including one sack that I thought was very unnecessary, which forced our kicker to kick an extra long field goal instead of a much easier field goal. And the Orlando Guardians, well, I think they're a mess. They have been rolling with three quarterbacks so far this year. This last game, they rolled with two, Pax Lynch and DeAndre Francois. And as you can see at the numbers, neither one of them did anything. Rushing, as you can see, like I said, our rushing attack was pretty abysmal. Only 23 yards rushing was our leading rusher by Kalen Balaj and our quarterback. It's not a good sign when your quarterback is your leading rusher. Look at the Guardians, they had a 46 yards as their leading rusher. Now, I did want to point out that John Hillman did record the Brahmas' first ever rushing touchdown. Receiving, the big star was Elise Mack, who had four receptions for 48 yards and one touchdown. He did have a spectacular one-handed catch earlier in the game that kept the drive alive, which did result in a touchdown. And then personally, I think that was the play of the game. Also, he did have one other touchdown that was called back. He was only maybe like half a yard shy of getting his second touchdown. But the connection between Jack Cohn and Elise Mack seems to be clicking. That little Notre Dame connection, Irish connection, and I think that he's shaping up to be a very good safety blanket for Jack Cohen. And as for the Orlando Guardians, well, they didn't do much of anything on offense. Now, defense, their leading tackler for the game was Mike Lee with 8 tackles. He also had one sack, along with Stanley Maponga, who had the other sack. For the Brahmas, my boy Delonte Scott led the team with 7 tackles. He was my boy because he was one of the Brahmas that I had told you earlier in the year to keep an eye on, mostly because he's an SMU grad and SMU is my wife's alma mater. So that's the reason why I was keeping an eye on him. He also did record one sack, and the other sack that we had was split between Drew Beasley and Mike Fedorov. So my key takeaways in the game. First, Jack Cohen looked much more comfortable and in charge of the game. He wasn't really flustered. The offensive line did give him more time to throw, so he was able to throw down the field a little bit more, was able to stretch out the field like I was asking them to. So on this pace, I think Jack Cohn will be in the running for the steer of the year. Second, our running game was terrible. We had -7 yards at the half. -7 yards. Completely unacceptable. Considering when we came into this game, Kalen Balaj was out rushing all the teams. The entire league. He had more rushing yards by himself than other teams had combined. And then we finished with a paltry 23 yards of rushing. So that needs to get fixed ASAP. Orlando was our best friend with all of their penalties. watching the game, I was thinking that maybe there was a laundromat that exploded nearby because with all that dirty laundry that the refs were throwing on the field, it's embarrassing how undisciplined Orlando was. They kept our drives sustained because, as you can see here, our third down efficiency was awful. I mean, we had zero third down conversions. Our only conversions were on those penalties. So Orlando was keeping our drives alive and they were killing their own drives. As I mentioned earlier, John Hillman was the recipient of our first rushing touchdown in franchise history. So good job for him. And Anthony Tejada was our first Brahma to get an interception and actually the first turnover in franchise history. And TJ Vasher got the first ever extra point conversion. And Travis Johnson was the first block punt in franchise history. So those were some good little firsts. Now, obviously, this is the first year of an expansion team, so there's going to be a lot of firsts, but I thought those are pretty cool. Now it's time for the branding of the Brahma. Now, because we'd had a victory, I'm going to give a brand of praise. And I think this one is going to be of no surprise to anybody. And I am going to brand quarterback Jack Cohen with the brand of praise. I mean, yeah, he didn't throw for a lot. His yards were very small, but he did throw for 3 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. So he took care of the ball. He managed the game. He threw the touchdowns when we needed him to. Thank, Thankfully for good field position and our good defense, put him in a great position where he didn't have to throw the ball all over the yard. But when he did, he made it count. So a brand of praise for Jack Cohen. My prediction accountability segment. I think I did a 50-50. So I predicted that Jack Cohen will pass for 2 touchdowns with no interceptions or turnovers. So got that one right, as he threw for 3 touchdowns with no turnovers. I predicted that Kalen Balaj will have over 100 yards rushing. He didn't even have 30 yards rushing, so that was a stinker. I predicted that the defense will hold Orlando to under 250 yards total offense. I probably should have predicted that we would hold them to under 200 yards, as the Guardians only mustered 175 yards of total offense. So, win on that one. And last but not least, I said the defense will sack Paxton Lynch 5 times and will have 1 defensive score. Well, we only had 2 sacks and we did not have any defensive scores. So, all right. So, with that, my prediction record for week 2, I was 50-50, had 2 right and had 2 wrong. Overall, I was right about 2.5 times, and I was wrong 5.5 times. Now, as far as the score goes, overall, I had predicted the Brahmas would score 3 more points than they actually did, and I had predicted that our opponents would score 9 less points than what they actually did. So my score predictions is a tad bit off. All right, now it's time for a sneak peek at next week. So next week we continue our road trip with the second of 3 road trips. And next week, we're going to be in Houston facing off the undefeated Houston Roughnecks. Now, I was kind of teasing and joking in my introduction for my last preview video about an unstoppable force. Well, I think Houston is that unstoppable force right now. They are the only franchise in XFL that has never lost. They were 5-0 in the shortened season in 2020, and now they're 2-0 this year. So this is going to be a rough test for the Brahmas. So we'll see how they do next week in Houston against the 2-0 Roughnecks. And that's it. That's the video. So what do you think of the game? Please let me know in the comments below. Thank you all so much for watching. I greatly appreciate each and every one of you. And until next time, keep your horns pointed upward and forward, San Antonio.